Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be the travel nursing Q&A that I promised you guys, and I got a lot of great questions, so I tried to combine them all to make sure that I answered all the questions but didn't answer the same question more than once. So if you don't see your exact question, you will see a very similar question, and I'm so excited to talk about this. I highly recommend travel nursing to anybody who's interested in it. It's such a great experience, so let's get started. I have all the questions on my phone, so if you see me looking down a lot, I'm looking at my phone because there's too many questions for me to remember. So the first question is, how much experience did you have before travel nursing? So I had exactly 1 year of experience in the ICU before I started travel nursing. And the second question follows along with this. Where did you work before you started travel nursing? I worked in the surgical trauma ICU at UVA, or the University of Virginia. Where have I worked? So I worked at UVA, like I just said, and then after that, when I was travel nursing, I worked at USC in Los Angeles. I worked at Martin Luther King Jr. Hospital in Compton, and then I went up to San Francisco, and I worked at Stanford and Kaiser San Francisco, and then I went to Maui, Hawaii, and worked at Maui Memorial, and then I came back over to the East Coast, and I worked at Washington Hospital Center. How long were you a travel nurse, and would you do it again? Yes, I would definitely do it again. I was a travel nurse for 2 years and it was so hard to stop. The only reason I stopped was because of school, and I absolutely loved it. So yes, I would do it again, and I plan to do travel CRNA after I finish school and get some experience. What was your favorite assignment? Maui, Hawaii was my favorite assignment by far because I love the ocean, I love the warm weather, I love hiking, I just loved everything about Maui. That was my favorite place. And my second favorite place was probably San Francisco because you're so close to the ocean and all the mountains and everything. I really loved it there, but I would definitely have to say Hawaii. Did your husband travel with you? Is he a nurse? A lot of people ask this question. Yes, he traveled with me. No, he is not a nurse. So my husband John is self-employed. He's a financial and business consultant, so he traveled with me and did consulting remotely, and he also does some investing. So it was really great. He basically worked on the same days as me, and some days I was off, he had to work in the first part of the day, but other than that, when I was off work, we were just exploring and adventuring, and it was super awesome. I know a lot of couples who traveled that were two nurses, and I also know a lot of couples who traveled that were like us. One was a nurse and one wasn't, and sometimes the other partner would be unemployed or work remotely, but either way you can work it out. What agency do you recommend, and do you recommend using multiple agencies? I'm going to answer the second part of this question first. I do not recommend using multiple agencies unless you only plan on doing 1 or 2 assignments. If you plan on traveling long term, I would stick with one agency and develop like a loyalty with them, because if you pin agencies against each other and jump around a lot, they're not really going to want to go out of their way to help you. I stayed with the same agency, which was American Mobile, for my entire 2 years because I had a great experience with them on my first assignment, and I credit my recruiter for that. So I'm going to leave my recruiter's information, Lindsey Lax. So if you're interested in contacting her, feel free. It's really important to get a good recruiter, even more so than getting a good agency, because the recruiter can really make or break your experience. And luckily I got a good one right off the bat, but I know some other people who weren't so lucky and went through a few before they found the right one for them. When do you start looking for your next assignment? So it depends on where I'm going. If I'm going somewhere that I know is very popular and it's going to be hard to get a job there, like Maui, I start looking for that assignment kind of right when I start the assignment that I'm at. So like 2 or 3 months out. But if I'm going somewhere like San Francisco, where I know it's going to be super easy to get an assignment because there's so many, I'll start looking like the last month, maybe the last 3 weeks before I leave, and I'm not really in a huge rush in that situation. Is it hard to find assignments? It is not hard to find assignments in my specialty in the ICU. And I've also seen it's not hard to find assignments if you're telemetry or med-surg or emergency room, anything that's kind of general, non-specialized. Now I could see it maybe being hard if your specialty was like stem cell transplant, because you'd be more limited on where you could go. But if you were willing to open up your applications to places that are similar, such as a regular oncology unit or maybe a telemetry unit, you would have a lot more options. Do you only take assignments in your specialty? So yes, I only take assignments in ICU, but I did take assignments outside of my specialty. Like I said, I started in surgical trauma ICU, and I took assignments as ICU float. I took assignments in open heart and CV ICU, and I've also been floated down to the emergency room, but I never took an assignment solely in the emergency room. I've just been floated there. So I would consider taking an assignment in the emergency room if I had kept traveling. Have you ever found it difficult to find housing? Now, I haven't personally had trouble finding housing because if I couldn't find it with a stipend on my own, like in San Francisco where it's really hard to find housing, I would just take the company housing, and the company housing has always been really nice with American Mobile. So my husband and I didn't want to have roommates, so we were a little bit more limited on like Airbnbs and things like that. It's much easier if you're willing to have roommates to find your own housing, but overall, no, finding housing was not a challenge for me because I was open to the stipend as well as the company housing. How many hours a week did you work? I worked about 36 hours a week average, but I also did work some overtime in there, and I would structure my schedule a lot so that I was working 6 on, 8 off. So I would work 6 12s in a row, but then I would have 8 days off. So it's basically like a vacation without actually taking any vacation. So you can really structure your schedule any way you want, and you can negotiate that in your contract. I'll probably make a whole nother video about contract negotiations in travel nursing so you know what to look for, because I could talk about that for a while, but generally 36 hours a week. How long is each assignment? So each assignment is 13 weeks typically. Now you could extend this beyond the 13 weeks, and I've also seen some shorter assignments. I did a shorter assignment when I first came to go to school and worked at the hospital where I am, but typically 13 weeks. Can you travel with your ADN? Yes, you can travel with your ADN, but just keep in mind you might be more limited about where you can go. I have seen a lot of jobs, like especially level 1 trauma centers and magnet hospitals, specify that you must have your BSN to work there, but there's also a lot of places that will take you with an ADN too, so don't get discouraged. Maybe you could start traveling with your ADN and work on your BSN, and then when you get your BSN, that'll open up more opportunities for you. What is orientation like? This is a good question because I had no idea what orientation was like when I started travel nursing, and I just didn't know what to expect and was super surprised about how it worked. But basically how orientation works is you do a online orientation through your company before you actually get to the hospital site, and that is like a bunch of paperwork and tests, like EKG tests, drug tests, like medication tests I mean, but yes, you also have to do a drug test too, and you get all your prerequisite things done. And then when you get to the actual site, you have an HR orientation with them, which is a typical HR orientation. It usually lasts a few days. Paperwork, computer charting, things like that, making sure everything's in order. A lot of hospitals will give you a test or a quiz when you get there on medications, blood administration, and EKG rhythms, if you're going somewhere like telemetry or ICU. So you get that clerical part done, and then you go on to your unit orientation where you're with another nurse for 1 to 3 days. I've had as little as 1 day of orientation before, but I've also had a full 3 days of orientation before, so it really just depends on where you're going. Is it hard to get hired as staff after traveling? It is not hard at all to get hired as staff after traveling. I actually had a job offer from every single assignment I've ever taken. When I was leaving, they always asked me if I wanted to stay, and I know that's kind of the same as long as you do a good job. I have a lot of friends that happen to as well, and I have a lot of friends that went to be staff somewhere where they really loved it. I would say travel nursing isn't looked down upon by managers looking to hire staff. I would think that it'd be a strength because they know that you can perform in different environments and adjust well. How do you deal with the stress of new places and hospitals? I love traveling and exploring, and I really hate staying in the same place for a long time, so going to new places didn't stress me out at all. It was very exciting to me and I loved it. But starting at new hospitals can be stressful, and the way that I deal with the stress, the number one tip that I have is to ask questions whenever you're unsure of anything, because it'll just make you feel so much better if you get advice from the charge nurse or other nurses on that unit about how they do things. So don't be afraid to ask questions. You're not supposed to know everything when you go to a new hospital, and also be flexible and be open because hospitals do everything differently, and that doesn't mean it's wrong. What is your number one advice for new travel nurses? Okay, my number one advice is to, does that make sense? Anyway, my number one piece of advice is to help other nurses on the unit and make yourself known to the staff there. This will help you so much. There's like this bad reputation of travelers for not being team players, and then there's this reputation that hospitals have for not supporting travelers, and I really think it's a two-way street, and both people kind of play into this. Keep in mind they don't know you. This is their unit. They all know each other, and you're coming as an outsider. They don't know if you're a strong nurse. They've probably seen travelers before that weren't great, so if you go in there and go above and beyond, help people when you're not busy, ask questions, offer your assistance, they're really gonna like you a lot better, and they're gonna see that you're a stronger nurse than they might have thought when you first got there. So I really think that helps a lot. Like when I do that, I definitely see within the first 1 to 3 weeks that I'm becoming more of a part of the unit and less of an outsider that's just there to fill a slot. Okay, I got a lot of tax questions. That's the last thing I wanted to address. I personally am not like an accountant or anything like that. I don't feel comfortable giving tax advice. I use an accountant to do my taxes. So what I would suggest is, since every state is different, you do your own research and talk to an accountant or a CPA in your state. I can't give you advice on what to do. I don't feel comfortable doing that because I don't even know what to do myself without researching and asking questions. So that's my answer to all your tax questions. I'm sorry that isn't a great answer. All right, that was the last question. That wraps up our Q&A. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. If you want to travel nurse, I say go for it. You won't regret it. It's so awesome. Now the rest of the day, I'll just be studying for finals because it's my finals week and it's the morning right now. I'm filming this, so I'll be studying all day, and then I have a whole month off for Christmas break, and I have a really fun trip planned, and I'm gonna really take advantage of that time and make a bunch of videos. So if you have any recommendations, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you next week.